Many, many lives around the world are going to be transformed and affected by artificial intelligence. If I think about the 1.4 billion people here in India, 1.3 billion people in Africa, people in North America, in Europe, and the Middle East, the questions we're going to take up today with a star-studded panel will be relevant to their lives and their children's lives. Our goal is to take up two questions in particular that will be central to debates about AI in the years to come. How can countries prepare for a transition to a society and an economy more driven by artificial intelligence, more affected by its nuances, by its design? Second, how much can countries converge on how society, how the world should govern this technology? So without further ado, we're going to plunge in. And Imran, since I have you right in front of me, I'm going to start with you.
I think what we noticed very much at the Safety Summit, and a big focus of our work going forward with partners, is the extent to which the science needs to keep developing as well. We're talking a lot about safe AI, without yet, I think, having a sufficient understanding of what we mean by safe AI. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done at the scientific level about how do you evaluate AI models successfully.
In our recommendation, we had three key pillars. The first pillar really is investing in AI infrastructure. The second one is really on policy infrastructure. So how do you make sure that you have people in your country who are AI ready, right? How do you build an AI ready workforce? How do you skill them? How do you work with private companies and public sectors and universities to make sure that people have the right access to AI training? And the third pillar is really about promoting widespread adoption of AI. So these three pillars, I think, set a good framework when thinking about how governments can help promote AI adoption, AI development in their society.
We are at a stage in the evolution of technology wherein we see AI as a great opportunity for leapfrogging from the solutions we have made to making much better solutions which can impact people at a large scale. So how do we ensure that we provide access to healthcare, solutions for farmers, or for every other sector? How can AI solutions be designed to do that? And while doing so, how do we address the issues of safety and trust? How do we ensure that user harm doesn't happen? And while doing so, you have to think of building up a framework in which we are able to balance between innovation and regulation. And while doing so, do not go in such a great extent of regulating that we kill innovation. There are countries which are much higher in the AI race. How can we learn from them? How can we share what can be done at a population scale in a country like India? Because the amount of data sets that we have is much more than any other country. So any model which is built and deployed in India and measures on the parameters of safety, trust, responsibility, ethics will largely be expected to work elsewhere also. The other key thing that we need to, especially a country like India, which has a huge IT workforce, is that how does it impact jobs? How do we look at future of work? How do we look at AI skilling? And very often I heard somewhere that AI doesn't kill jobs. Not having AI skills will kill jobs. So having a way of skilling, upskilling, reskilling, in order to ensure we are able to take this advantage will be a very, very important issue.
How can the world reskill and prepare for a set of conditions that might require very different job market approaches?
The way in which a lot of people are actually going to experience AI and use it is going to be through enterprise use cases. And it's going to be through brands, in fact, whether it is their interactions with financial services or healthcare or consumer goods or automotive. And so there's this really important element here that we want to bring to the forefront of, how will AI impact people, but how will AI impact industries? And then their interactions with people. That also has an important layer that ties into the different responsibility elements we talked about with AI, because all of these enterprises, all of these brands have a built-in necessity to be safe, to be secure, to be accurate, to be responsible. So this is certainly critical. On skilling, we are very committed to this, and again, there is a symbiotic relationship between the desire to increase the skills, the AI readiness that people have, as well as to support the services we have. We've seen here in India an amazing capacity and interest to utilize the free skilling programs that we have, where we had expected that in this past year we were going to have about 500,000 people trained, and it was about 3 million. So the appetite is there, the capacity is there, and the opportunity and need is there.
What should countries do to prepare?
The first is the necessity for breadth in thinking about governance, and the second is the urgency around depth of governance. The necessity of breadth really is captured by the fact that, as the Vice President has said, we're talking about a ubiquitous general purpose technology that represents a full spectrum of possible risks, from bias and discrimination all the way up to those that consume many who have been developing AI for many years. And actually, this discussion and the evolution of the policy in the United States did not begin with ChatGPT. There's been several years of efforts to develop a breadth of approaches to developing responsible AI, characterized by two major documents. One, the AI Bill of Rights, and the second being the NIST Risk Management Framework, both of which capture an underlying foundational effort, consensus-driven, to build a framework for dealing with these issues. That is, you need safe and secure AI. You need to balance innovation and competition in any public policy choices. You need to have public policy in place that supports workers, that advances equity and civil rights, that confronts issues of privacy, that protects consumers, and that, of course, ensures that as governments themselves apply AI, it's done in the most responsible ways as a model for societies.
You need to drive accessibility, and you need to have the policy frameworks to actually support that. So when I look at trust, I'm looking at it from various angles. The first is the fact that you need to build the trust and confidence in people that what they're using will really give them good results. You've got to build the trust in enterprises when they're using technology, AI technology, that it won't take them down the wrong road, right? That manifests itself in a lot of things, which is capacity building, education, how do you use AI properly, the responsible use of AI, etc. The second part is when I talk about access, it's all about making sure that it's completely inclusive and it's available to all. You cannot have, and we were having this conversation this morning, you can't have data sets which exclude a large part of the world. You can't have access to this technology only reflected in a few parts of the world. It needs to be made available to everyone, irrespective of the geography, irrespective of your where you're coming from. And then you need to have those policy frameworks which need to build upon. If we don't have globally coherent, harmonized norms, we will have the chance of bad actors leveraging policy gaps or regulatory gaps and actually using it incorrectly, which will then go back down and strike the trust factor that you wanted to build.
So, Stefan, share with us your perspective both about what you think is most important and how that process is going.
The perspective of the German government and the perspective of the European Union is that we need an innovation-friendly regulation framework for AI. It's indeed a new technology, and therefore it makes no sense to regulate it in every detail. We need this innovation-friendly environment, and we need a balance between the possibilities and potential risks of AI. And in the dynamic landscape that we have in the international AI governance, I wish to emphasize three key elements that are relevant for me at the moment. First, that new international initiatives, and mentioned the G7, the GPAI, the UN activities in the field of AI, that these new international initiatives must be integrated meaningfully and sustainably, and we have to avoid redundancy. This makes no sense if we have different regulation. Second, we must consider a broad spectrum of AI risks while not losing the sight of the immense opportunities, as I mentioned before. And third, a multi-stakeholder approach is extremely essential in developing AI policies. So government, companies, and academia has to work, in the civil society has to work here together to find the best solutions.
One place where we have not yet confronted the real challenge that will emerge beyond low Earth orbit is when we get to the question of risk, ones that may touch on national security equities. At that point, the kinds of global cooperative dynamics become much harder work through. So for instance, if you wanted to talk about transparency and red teaming for a particular kind of national security risk, it has a whole series of implications about who would have access to a system, what would be revealed under what circumstances, which may not actually be as easy to globalize.
It is more helpful if we have self-regulation by the companies. The companies, big companies, have no interest to develop AI with a bad purpose. Yeah, I don't think so. And therefore, I think that the self-regulation is the best way. And if there is a development in the wrong direction, you can act directly, and you can combine the self-regulation with a new precondition that AI has to fulfill. Transparency was mentioned a lot of time before. Only a self-regulation by the companies is not helpful. Therefore, we need some guidelines. And the authorities, the state authorities, have to control if the companies fulfill these self-regulations. So it's a little bit difficult word, but it's at the end a regulated self-regulation. Yeah, so that you have something like an instrument if the companies do not fulfill what they print out in their self-regulation.
The first thing that strikes us, where is the equitable access to compute, data sets, or algorithms? Like the biggest problem that all of us are facing, the researchers, startups, is that compute is limited. It's there with a few companies and a few countries. To right now, the supply chain gaps that are there in getting H100s or A100s also is huge, and the other companies are still catching up. So to get access to compute for all countries is going to be very, very challenging. And how do we build a framework in which everybody gets through? Can we think of building a CERN for AI? Some compute facility within global community comes together, and any researcher, whichever part of the world he is in, if he wants to use that compute, can he get access to that? Can the global community think of building that?
Imran.
I actually think some of the issues on generating benefits between countries are going to be the most challenging for countries to deal with, because there's a lot of things that governments need to get right in order to ensure that the benefits are delivered for our citizens. There's lots of quite complicated things about data governance, as well as what we were hearing in the previous keynote about data creation. That historically has been quite a difficult thing for governments to get right. So there being a bit of competitive tension between governments on getting that right is probably no bad thing. And what I'm noticing a lot in government-to-government conversations is we're comparing notes, and we're trying to boast to each other about what we're doing on that. And again, I think that's a good dimension in which to have competition. I agree with the comments that have been made about the competition that's emerging on compute. I think if we continue to manage that in a way that ensures there's broad access to compute, I think the European Union is doing that through the HPC network. We've been doing that through the investments in the UK that we're making in research resources, supercomputers for AI, the same as the EU. So again, I'm hopeful that in the way in which we manage for the benefits, the competition actually delivers good things. But I think when you read a lot of the reporting around this, the competition gets talked about a lot. Gets observed a lot, and I think it's just worth getting a layer underneath that and saying what are the negative effects of this competition, whereas I think there could be a lot of positive effects of the competition.
So to say just a touch more, Imran, about those negative effects. So what is the kind of competitive dynamic that you think would not be helpful?
So again, look, this is something that's been commented on a lot. Are there companies, for example, in their development of AI models, who are racing so fast to get a model out that as a consequence of that, they're not observing the right protocols about safety or the right protocols about red teaming? I think that is something now that companies are putting a lot more focus on. I think that is something that we as governments, individually and collectively, are putting a lot more focus on. It started with the voluntary commitments made at the White House by a set of companies. We continued that theme through into the UK AI Safety Summit. I know it's a big feature of other international conversations about this as well. And I've got to say, even in the time that I've been part of this conversation, I'm seeing that conversation moving a lot in terms of the companies. Maturing a lot. I'm seeing the companies invest a lot more in safety. Not saying the problem is solved, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction.
throughout the day, many discussions of AI and some discussions of digital public infrastructure have noted that the world can benefit and has benefited and is benefiting from open source models. They have certain properties. They allow adaptation and fine-tuning. They allow some jurisdictions that are not able to train their own models to benefit from these innovations. By the same token, I want to maybe invite you to reflect a little bit on whether you could imagine a situation where the technology advances to a degree that you would be a little worried about something going open source.
You pose a very interesting question, but I don't think so. The issue is about open source or proprietary, because you're talking about the concerns of someone or some organization or some nation state using a model for improper usage. And I think that's where the entire governance framework, the risk-based mechanism, and what do you use it for, the usage model issue comes into the picture. So if something can be used for good or it can be used for bad, then we need to be sure that whether it's open sourced or it's proprietary, it doesn't get into that stream. Or if it does get into that stream, there are controls which are around that. Yes, there is that concern sometimes that, something which is open source can go rogue, but then I think proprietary also has the same concerns. You can always build on top of it, right? So I think I'm not saying the question is wrong. It's a correct question to ask, but then it comes back to the framework of what are the guardrails that we are building in place for organizations. Just shooting off the hip.
I take your point, and part of what I'm hearing from you is that you recognize the concern, but you'd like there to be a different way of just detecting improper use
That's
and
right.
responding to
That's
it.
right.
I would note that one of the challenges technically might be whether it's possible to have an open source model where the guardrails cannot be stripped away.
It's a question that we need to answer. The thing is that if we clamp down on open source right now, then you're possibly also clamping down on innovation. So you need to do that balance.
Other thoughts about this?
Yeah, I would say agree to what Ashutosh said, but I would just like to add that open source also gives you an opportunity for detecting the possibilities of any wrong that's going on. Once it's proprietary, then very often many people will not even know how the algorithm is working, what it is doing. The whole issue explainable AI also comes in. So in open source, once you are opening it up for the community and for the developers, everyone to see, they're able to see that. So there is a greater community check with regard to what the model is doing, is actually doing the same or doing anything different. So to that point, I would feel that, again, my personal opinion is that open source models would anyway score much better than proprietary models, because sometimes proprietary models may be built on such kind of algorithms and compute that even the regulators or anyone trying to make sense of what it's doing might feel there might be a challenge to doing that.
Let's put it that way, that there's additional work to be done in identifying capability thresholds, right? Anything you want to say on that score?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the challenge. The executive order creates a compute threshold, which I think most people acknowledge will probably not ultimately be the threshold. But in the absence of something more clear right now, and the lack of clarity is captured in the discussion we're having right now, we have to move towards as sound of a public policy framework as we can as quickly as possible. And so this is one of those unusual moments when public policy is being made with full acknowledgement that it's only a very initial step and will have to be recalibrated probably very soon.
I want you to just take a moment to just quickly imagine the AI future you would most like to see in 5 years, and say just a brief 20, 30 seconds about it.
It feels so different to me from so many things I've worked on over the years, going back to how complex global issues were negotiated, for trade in the 90s or onwards. We're in a very fast-moving situation here, and there is a willingness to work together and to know we do not have all the answers. And rather than trying to do nothing until we can do everything, but to be very explicit and say, someone's going to take a step, someone's going to iterate on that and build on it. We're going to acknowledge straight out that this is not done. And so my process point is that I hope that this continues. I hope that this is a new way of actually working together collaboratively in a multi-stakeholder way on fast-moving issues with humility and openness and a deep desire to make the steps where we can and to course correct when we find we need to.
There's a lot said and written about how AI is the spur for the next industrial revolution. If anything like that is true, then I think we should reflect on the fact that previous industrial revolutions, the gains of those have not been shared equitably between countries or within countries. Can we do a better job with this one? I think that's my hope, and I think that should be a real focus for how we think about the governance of this together.
The thing that gets me most excited about AI are the use cases and the applications, right? When you think about something like AlphaFold, and folding proteins in a year, 200 million proteins in a year, in what would have taken 1 billion human hours. Science at digital speed, right? So what it opens up in terms of personalized medicine, how it can cure cancer, things like that. I think in 5 years' time, I really hope to see many different research applications, use cases built on top of all this kind of very basic scientific discovery that AI is able to enable. So I think what I fear is regulation that is not based on scientific rigor and sort of technical understanding of how the technology works. So ensuring that balance between innovation and regulation is there and it's enabling instead of constraining.
Thank you, Abhishek.
Yeah, I would say 5 years is a bit long when you look at the pace at which this technology is evolving. But yes, if I have to say what it will do, like one thing that will revolutionize is like the interface between the communications between people across the world will become speech oriented, and people will be able to speak any language, communicate with anyone. So the whole issue of language barriers may be breached in the next few years. We are seeing that already happening in India, and we feel that will happen globally. And more advances, I agree with what Yunus said about use of AI for innovating in solving key healthcare problems, in gene design, drug design, so drug development, all of it will transform the way we live our lives. So that was there. The risk, I feel, is that the biggest risk is that we may keep on going this debate of innovation, regulation, and it should, if it's not globalized, if we don't come out with a framework, the technology may get limited to a few companies or a few countries, and then we will not be able to leverage the potential advantages that we have.
My wish is that in 5 years we have concrete standards, that we have certificates, that we have more transparency about AI.
I look at social equity, human well-being, a healthier planet. These are the 3 goals that I look at. And the only thing that I think that will prevent us from doing that is if we very quickly don't come down from 45,000 feet to 1,000 feet and get agreement.